Hello! Welcome to Kelly's Cult Classics. So today we have a very exciting series that I'm going to start because recently I decided to subscribe to the Book of the Month Club. Now, just to let you know, this video is not sponsored, so it's going to be my honest opinion of the Book of the Month Club. My goal is to review each book I get, and then over a certain amount of time I feel like we'll start to get a good idea about whether or not I think Book of the Month Club is worth it for me and for readers with my similar taste. How Book of the Month Club works is you subscribe and it's $15 a month, although I got my first month for $10, which was a deal. I don't know if that's how it always is when you first subscribe, probably. But generally it's gonna be $15 a month, which is what kind of drew me to it because I felt like that was a reasonable price. Like, I wanted to try out a book subscription service, but I also wanted to make sure it was gonna be like quality books and not too expensive and worth my money. So I went with Book of the Month Club because it's actually been around since the 20s and it's helped make a lot of famous novels famous. So like Catcher in the Rye, I think it was like The Invisible Man. I think Ernest Hemingway was one of them too. So that's first why I was drawn to it, was because of the price I thought was reasonable, and then also it had a history of choosing good books. And then not only that, but I looked on its site and you can look back on past months picks, and so I did that and I looked, and in most of the past months for the past like 2 years there had been books I either read and liked, what were on my to-read list, or looked interesting. So I thought, like, okay, so based on what it's been doing in the past couple of years, the books would also be within my interest. And so I know in the past, I don't know, 3-4 years, like, Book of the Month readjusted its marketing strategy to become a more subscription service targeted towards millennial women. Now, I consider myself a zillennial, like kind of in between millennial and Gen Z, so I kind of straddle both, so I'm like, could still apply to me. So that was their marketing strategy, was to gear towards millennial women. A lot of the books are mysteries, historical fiction, or like quirky romances, it seems, which I do like a lot of those kinds of books, especially the historical fiction and the mysteries part of it. And then every once in a while they'll have like a memoir or a nonfiction. So I'm like, okay, I can get with this. I think the genres will be something I like, and it seems like there'll always be something I like in the picks. So each month there are 5 books you can pick from, and the books are picked from a panel of judges who review the books and curate the list to the best 5 books that they think their membership would be interested in. So that was something else I liked. It wasn't just kind of like pulling a book out of nowhere. It seemed like there was a lot of thought put into each month's picks, so that was something else I liked. So the first book I picked was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. And so I ordered it online. I picked it from the 5 choices, and it shipped pretty decently. I think it shipped within a week, and then I got it within a week from the shipping date. So I got this book in the box for $10. It would have been $15 if it was a regular month. Oh, and another thing about Book of the Months is, so for $15 you get to pick one of the 5 judge books, but then for an additional $10 each you can choose up to 2 add-ons, and those are, from what I can tell, mostly previous Book of the Month Club books. So I actually did do an add-on for my first month, mainly because it was a Simone St. James book, her newest one, and I've actually been wanting to get that, so it was just a book I've wanted to get, and I'm like, oh, for $10 seems like a good deal. So I got that book too. So The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett is, I think it's one of their historical fiction books. I mean, there are some mystery aspects to it, but I think it would largely classify as a historical fiction book. It was a great first book. I'm so glad I picked it. I know at the end of the year, members can vote for best book of the year. I have a strong feeling that my book of the year will be this book, just because it was so good. So the book, it starts, well, it technically starts in the 60s, but the 2 main characters were born in the 50s, and that's very important because they're born in a very, very small town in Louisiana in the 50s, which is segregation, right? And the two sisters are twins. They're born in a town that is full of very light-skinned black people. So they're basically people who can look very similar to a white person, but because they're not white, they're black. In this time period, they can't live like a white person or in the white person's world, but at the same time, the city feels separated from other African American communities that have more darker skin. So the town itself is just kind of in a unique position where they're kind of between worlds, and I think that's a theme that carries on throughout the book of trying to live between two worlds and being forced to choose one of it, and how just the way society was structured for so long made it very difficult for someone just to straddle both those worlds if they wanted, and it forced people to make decisions. So the two sisters are very light-skinned, and their father ended up being lynched by an angry white mob, and they witnessed it, so I'm sure they were both emotionally damaged by that horrific episode. And I think it really set the tone for both of the twins wanting to leave. So eventually they do leave. When they're like 16, they run away to New Orleans, a city I went to school in, so it's close to my heart, but I don't live in New Orleans anymore. They go to New Orleans, and eventually one of the sisters leaves the other one, and kind of the sister who's still in New Orleans doesn't know where she went, and they're now separated. And so that sister, she ends up alone, and she decides to marry this man who is very, very dark skinned. Like, I think it's described like his skin was almost black, like full black. And she moves to DC, she's in this relationship, and the relationship ends up becoming very abusive. So she eventually goes back to that town, but she has a daughter, and the daughter has skin like her father, so she is very, very black in a town of light-skinned people. And so that makes it difficult for her daughter to grow up, because the light-skinned children are making fun of her for her dark skin. And I think that whole situation just shows like colorism, and how colorism persists not only in society at large, but also within the African American community, and also other communities too. I've heard of issues with colorism, so I thought that was just an interesting perspective of it. So that's like one side, like that sister ends up back in the town and raises the daughter in the town. She ends up entering into this romantic relationship that I actually love. Like, I love her partner after she leaves the abusive one, her new partner. I thought like that relationship was one of my favorite, because it was like they never really defined their relationship, they never got married, but you could tell they loved each other, and I thought it was just very wholesome, and especially after everything she went through with the abusive husband. So that's just a side note though. And then the other sister, the reason she left New Orleans was actually because she wanted to pass over and pass as white. So she ends up passing as white, gets a job as a white woman, marries a white man, and basically never tells anyone that she's actually black, and because she's so light skinned that she can pass as white. But the whole of her adult life, she's terrified that she's going to be found out, because people are so racist, and she's like, you know, my husband loves me now, but will he love me if he finds out that I'm black? And will the people in my neighborhood accept me? And so it's kind of like she keeps that secret guarded in like her own Fort Knox, and that ends up causing a lot of just internal turmoil for herself and eventually her daughter, because she too has a daughter. So it's kind of like the sisters' stories are parallel, and then each of the sisters' daughters, their stories become parallel, and then the two daughters, they eventually intersect, and then there's this whole reckoning. One of my favorite things about this book is I feel like Britt Bennett was able to put in so many different perspectives about identity and culture and racism and sexism and just different perspectives and different experiences that a person can have being black. And I thought it just, like, I learned a lot from this book, and I think it was wonderful because it didn't feel like there was a lot going on, and a lot of different identities being brought up, but it didn't feel forced. It all just felt very natural, kind of like how life would feel. Because, you know, we have the sisters who are very light-skinned, but one continues to live in her light-skinned town after she gets into the abusive relationship and leaves it, and then she has a very dark-skinned daughter, and the daughter is so kick-ass, let me tell you. Like, I mean, she eventually leaves the town because she spent her whole life being bullied there. It was very heartbreaking. She gets a track scholarship, goes to California, and she actually enters into a relationship with a transgender black man, so that added in another like identity to the story that really just put that situation in a different perspective, and I thought it was super interesting. And then she also eventually becomes a doctor, which is just so amazing. I love that. Like, she was my favorite character. The sister that crossed over and was pretending to be white, I had such a hard time liking her. Like, at the beginning I thought that, like, oh, maybe I'm gonna like this one. Also, sorry I'm not using their names. I'm literally terrible at names so much, and I read this book last month and I just can't remember any of their names. Like, I can tell you so many details about this story, but I can't tell you their names. Oh, Stella. It's Stella and Desiree. So Desiree is the sister who eventually stays in town, and Stella is the sister who crosses over. But I actually ended up not liking Stella that much. I can understand the difficult position she was in because she wanted to have all these opportunities, but she couldn't have them because she was black and people were racist. So that's why she crossed over and passed as white. So I get that, but at the same time, when she's passing as white, she's literally kind of terrible to the, like, a black family moves in across from them, and she's kind of terrible to them at first, and part of it is because she thinks they'll be able to tell that she's not really white, because she talks about how, you know, before, when she would pass as white for maybe like a day when she was a child, white people couldn't tell, but other black people could tell. So she was really afraid that they would out her. And, like, again, I get that anxiety, but she honestly was, like, and terrible to this family. I mean, eventually the women kind of became friends, but then they had to stop being friends because the thing is, at first, like, her daughter wanted to play with the daughter of the black family across the street, but then the mother was like, no, you can't do that, and the woman was like, why? And Stella was like, because they're N-words. And so she kind of set the tone for her own daughter to be racist. And then eventually the daughter, when she's playing with the daughter across the street, calls the daughter the N-word. And the mother of the neighbor child is like, you know, I can clearly see how you raised your child and your true thoughts. And so then they don't talk anymore. And it's just like, I feel so bad for that family across the street. Like, they eventually have to move because subdivision is racist, and I feel so bad for them. And it made it hard for me to like Stella because it's like she was contributing to the prejudice against them, and it was a hard hurdle to get over. And then also her daughter grew up to be like so spoiled. It was also very hard to like the daughter because the daughter does kind of have those like microaggressions embedded in her because the daughter grew up white, never knowing that she actually is part black. And then she also grew up spoiled because the guy Stella married was super rich. So she was hard to tolerate, especially compared to Desiree's daughter, who was amazing and I loved her. But Desiree's daughter and Stella's daughter eventually meet and their paths kind of collide, and then it comes to this reckoning where Desiree's daughter tells Stella's daughter the truth. And that's just kind of reckoning for a lot of the characters, but specifically Stella and her daughter. Stella eventually makes a trip back to the town she's from to visit her mother and her sister, but she doesn't stop passing as white. And she also didn't return for the grandmother's funeral, I'm pretty sure, or like her mother's funeral. So I'm like, that's kind of rude. I just thought this was a very powerful book. So good. And I feel like it had a lot to say, and it said it well. And I love when a book does that. I love that it was like both historical, but also a lot of the things the author was saying in it had to do directly today with our own problems with race and our own issues with prejudice and cultural identity. So I really love this book. I do recommend it. There were just so many good parts of this book that I read, and I'm like, wow, that was so good. So I recommend 100%. So first month of Book of the Month Club was successful. It was a great book. Now the second book will be a little different. Well, that's my video. I hope you guys liked it. Please let me know if you guys have Book of the Month, if you're interested in Book of the Month. I'll keep doing these so that we can see over time if they end up being a good deal, if it's worth it, if you like these kind of books. So I'll keep doing this each month I get it. Of course, like I said, there are 5 books to pick from, and I'm just picking one of the books, so that doesn't necessarily mean I'm picking the best book. I do try to research them a little bit before I pick the books, but we'll see. I'll keep doing this. We'll see what August has to bring. But I'm really excited about it. I'll do it at least for, you know, maybe 6 months to really get a good sense of it, and then I'll decide whether or not I want to keep it, if I think it's worth it, or if I want to move on to either just not doing a subscription, or maybe I'll find like a different subscription I like. I don't know. But yeah, so that was my first Book of the Month Club video. It's gonna be kind of a little mini series on this channel. Like my video, comment on my video, subscribe to my channel, and have a great day. Bye.